Welcome, everybody. My name is Vanessa Blackburn, and I'm a search partner with Tucker Stone. And I'm delighted to be joined today by Mel Bly, who is an expert in employee engagement, leadership, and supporting the well-being of leaders and teams, and has her own business, Thrive Development. Welcome, Mel.
Thanks, Vanessa.
So we're so grateful for you to be joining us today to discuss how building awareness of menopause is a gateway to trust, belonging, and performance in organisations. So let's get started.
Okay.
So, can you share with us why menopause awareness is such a hot topic at the moment? You described it to me recently as a steam train coming towards us.
Yeah, basically, 50 plus women are the fastest growing segment in our workplace, and the typical age of menopause is 45 to 55. What we've seen is a lot of women exiting the organisation at this point because they're in the sandwich generation, which means they may have challenging careers, caring responsibilities, whether that be children or elderly parents, and then
Right.
if they get significant menopause symptoms, and that is an if because it's not a universal experience,
Mm,
it can be the straw that breaks the camel's back.
mm,
So what we can see, and we've seen a huge exodus of women silently at this time, and so it's becoming a very significant talent issue for organisations.
okay. So, I think we know that a lot of this is about creating empathy and understanding and raising awareness.
Mm.
What are some of the practical things organisations should be doing?
Well, I think it's something that organisations need to get on their agenda. So it
Mm,
needs to be part of, I believe it should be part of a diversity and inclusion strategy. Um, it should be part of our people strategy and how we support our colleagues. For me, it's no different to supporting mental health
yeah,
issues and such like. It's going to impact, a huge population of people. Every
yes,
female will go through it. And some other colleagues may go through a similar experience. So certain cancer treatments in men can create certain symptoms as well, and IVF. So when we do awareness with leaders, we broaden the discussion because actually this is about understanding our colleagues so we can support them, so we can
yes,
keep them engaged and belonging in our organisations.
excellent. Okay. And what are some of the more specific things around the work that you're doing with organisations?
So I primarily do leadership awareness. So I will get people together, and that can be virtual or in a classroom. But actually, we need a place where we can get together as groups, small groups, and have a discussion about this. Get on the same page because there are quite a lot of myths about what the menopause is and isn't, and
Mm,
there's also quite a lot of ignorance, whether you're male or female. We don't really get taught about this at school, and this is something that the women's health strategy is going to start tackling over the next few years. This will start to get taught in schools. So I think in 20, 30 years time we won't be having this discussion because it'll be
right.
part of what we know and part of what we manage, but right now we've got a gap. So I get leaders in a room and we talk about, what are the facts, what are the myths, but then we also talk about what are the stories, what are the real stories around this, because actually, facts make us think, but they don't make us feel, and they don't make us act. So one of the things I build in empathy to the programs through, gathering real stories from colleagues within that particular business so that we can really connect with what this might be like for somebody.
Yeah.
As people, we don't want our colleagues to suffer. And
Yes.
many women going through menopause do suffer. I also help leaders think about what do you now do to support your colleagues. So what's your leadership role? What do you do when you leave this room? Which is very important.
Mm, mm. And one of the things that we talked about that I thought was really interesting recently was there was a particular population in one of your sessions that were particularly empathetic to women
Yeah.
experiencing this.
I don't know if it was just particular to this client, but I had quite a lot of young male leaders, which you would think, oh, they're probably not very interested in this topic.
Right.
And when they came in, a lot of them probably did look a bit bemused. But what I found is by telling those stories, connecting them to this is what it might be like, they left thinking, oh goodness, I think that colleague in my team may be going through some of this. I now look differently at what my mother's been through and the conversations we need to have. Some of them have started to have different discussions and different relationships with family members as a result of being on the programs, which for me is very rewarding, because actually this is a societal issue, not just an
Absolutely.
organizational one. Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier diversity and inclusion,
Yeah.
and it really strikes me that a lot of what we're talking about here, covers engagement and really connects to D&I strategies.
Mm.
So how can organisations sort of bring that to the table in the wider sense to link it to those strategies?
Well, if you think about what diversity and inclusion is trying to do, it's ultimately trying to create belonging so that every colleague feels that they've got a voice and they can bring their differences to bear.
Yeah.
And it's no different with menopause. I think sometimes women can feel like they've lost their voice or they're less relevant during this time. And that some of that might be a real feeling, or it might just be their experience. But it's about, how do we keep somebody, how do we value somebody, how do we include somebody, how do we inspire somebody during this challenging time? And actually, by providing the right level of support, that person will feel much more emotionally engaged to the place they work. They will feel much more gratitude, and they will, keep contributing, which is what we want. We want to retain, and we want people to contribute in our organizations.
And you mentioned retention there. And I think the whole sort of subject of, particularly specialist and senior talent retention,
Yeah.
I think there's some of the sort of bigger cost implications. I think there's a couple of areas. So, that, but also in terms of, the risk of not taking some of this seriously. Can you
Yeah.
take us through some of that?
Well, we do know that there is quite a lot of retention issues linked to menopause. So a lot of it has gone under the radar. So women have left because they've not felt supported, or they've left because it's just too much to sort of take menopause on top of everything else. So about 1 in 10 women exit the workplace during menopause. 1 in 4 are considering it. And if you think about senior leaders, particularly, we're already trying really hard to get sort of equality on boards, and we're trying to get to 40%. We're still not there yet in the FTSE 350, and depending upon where we are in the FTSE 350, we're 32 or maybe 35, but we're not at that 40%. So actually, we really need to work hard at retaining those senior female executives, because otherwise we're never going to hit those figures. It's like a leaky bucket right now, and it's easier, I think, for female colleagues who have got senior roles. They maybe have more monetary flexibility to exit, but actually, if you think about the expertise they have, it's just disastrous to let them walk out of the door. And that's what's happening.
Right, right. And what about some of the sort of costs associated with sort of risk?
Well, I mean, we know the costs globally around menopause are phenomenal. It's something like 150 billion pound a year globally as an impact to businesses through a number of different factors. One of the key ones is around absence. So, 1 in 50 women going through menopause will have long-term absence linked to some menopausal symptoms, of which there are 40 plus. It's not just a hot sweat. This is, and we could have a whole different session just on the symptoms of the menopause. But it's a complicated thing, and 1 in 5 are having more casual absence, but they're not being open about why they're absent, because they don't feel comfortable. They don't feel like they've got anywhere to go with this discussion yet, because we know that only 16% of organizations are doing any menopause awareness whatsoever. So it's not something that's talked about. Most organizations have not even thought about this yet, even though everybody's talking about the menopause. Well, no, actually 44% of organizations not even thought about this. 15% say it's not a priority, and 7 say it's too sensitive or difficult to talk about. Well, leadership is difficult.
Yes, of course. Yes,
So
absolutely.
let's make it easier by building empathy.
Yes, yes, and that really does feel very much that that's really at the crux of what we need to be doing.
Yeah.
And what about some of that sort of really tangible cost around women that feel that they have potentially been unfairly treated? I know there's
Yeah.
been talk about it potentially being a protected characteristic. Can you just cover that briefly?
Yeah, so currently, as it stands, menopause will not be a protected characteristic, but it's not off the table. It's still being discussed. Caroline Noakes, who's heading up the Women's Inequality Committee, clearly still thinks it should be, but
Mm,
actually, right now, it's covered under sex, age, and disability. So it's quite difficult for a woman to go to tribunal
yeah,
because she's got to link it to one of those protected characteristics. However, even though that's the case, tribunals related to menopause are going up 44% year on year. So women are navigating quite a sketchy landscape
yeah.
legally and still going to tribunal, which
Mm,
is not what organisations want, right? Who wants that damage to their brand?
yes.
What does it say about our organisation that we don't support our colleagues? Whether it's menopause or not, it sends quite a clear message, and it's damaging,
Mm,
obviously. And women can claim damages at those tribunals. Sex discrimination, no upper limit,
yeah.
and there are other costs associated. But I think the bigger cost is to the brand.
Yes. Yes.
Personally, we can
Yes.
talk we can talk 45,000 for harm to feelings or whatever, but actually the bigger cost is the brand
Mm,
and
mm,
what it says to everybody else in that organization and
mm,
outside of it.
yes. And I think, in summary, I mean, first of all, it's such a big topic, and obviously, we could talk about it, forever.
Yeah,
But I think, the impact on sort of reputational risk and the brand is obviously
yeah,
significant. But I think ultimately the impact on talent is significant, and that's why we, at Tucker Stone have such a big interest.
absolutely.
Um, so, we really appreciate your time, Mel. I think, we've talked about the possibility of you running some free workshops for our CPO
Yep,
population. And I
absolutely.
think that would be great to sort of delve into the subject a little bit further. So thanks so much for your
Great.
time.
Pleasure.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.